Okay, so now let's finish the other 5 points on the rubric. So we've gone over contextualization and thesis. Now let's finish the other 5 points on the rubric. Okay, you have a possibility of earning 3 total points in evidence. Evidence, this is support for your thesis statement or evidence that supports your thesis statement claims. Now, in this evidence, it has to come from the documents for 2 of the points and then beyond the documents for 1 point. Okay, to earn 2 of those evidence points, you must support the argument, your claim, in response to the prompt using 6, write that down, very important, 6 of the documents that are in the document packet. Okay, so if you only describe the documents, you're gonna get, or if you only describe 3 of the documents, you're only going to get 1 of those 2 points. But in order to get both of the points, you have to respond by describing accurately 6 of the documents you cannot quote. You're going to describe them, the context for 6 documents. In addition, the response must use the content of the documents to support that argument in response to the claim. So not just describing these documents, but describing them in a way that supports your claim. Describe the documents in a way that supports the claim of your thesis statement. Whenever I get into kind of reviewing those documents with you, hopefully it will become more clear. Okay, so 6 documents accurately describing the context of 6 of the documents supporting your claim. Okay, if you accurately describe fewer than 6 of the documents in your body paragraphs supporting your claim or your thesis statement, if you do fewer than 6 but more than 3, you'll get 1 point. If you accurately describe 6 of those documents supporting your claim, so using at least 6 of the documents within the body of your essay, and remember, I'm going to kind of side note here, remember that when you're done analyzing a document, explaining that document, the context of the document to support your thesis statement claim, you want to cite the document. Really simple citation, open parentheses, doc, close parentheses, period. So cite the documents, just letting the reader, me, know that I'm explaining this document, maybe a document A, document H. I am explaining the context of that document here, using that document in support of my thesis statement. Okay, so you've got a possible 2 points for explaining 6 documents, the context of 6 documents in support of your thesis statement. Okay, then within the body paragraphs somewhere, you need to have 1 additional piece of specific historical evidence that's not found in the documents. Okay, so what are some things not found in the documents? There are a lot of things, like if you were going with African Americans, you might go with like the incidences of lynching, like the Red Summer, or if you were going with the changes in like the literary movement that criticized consumerism and criticized the lack of fulfillment, like deep fulfillment in people's lives, and that mentioned materialism already. You've got F. Scott Fitzgerald is not in the documents. Okay, so let's say that you're going with something like the clash of modernism and cultural values. I mean, like you've got Ford, who is like the automobile is not mentioned at all, and so that's something that is progress itself, and the escape from the mundane or whatever of American life, and it represents maybe this wild, progressive, and untraditional way of life. But then you've got Henry Ford, who made it available for Americans, who is an anti-Semitic, and he very strongly holds to traditional values. So he's someone that's not in the documents. These are ideas not in the documents necessarily that you might use. The Harlem Renaissance, you've got one African-American writer that's in the documents, but you might use some other Harlem Renaissance artist or writers like Zora Neale Hurston that's not in the documents, that take they take this new sense of pride in being Black, and they find a cultural community that they thrive in Harlem. Okay, and then there's also maybe Marcus Garvey. You might discuss Marcus Garvey and this idea of like Black nationalism. So those are just some ideas for things outside of the documents that you might use. Okay, and I will come back to that whenever we do the video on the documents themselves. Okay, so one piece of evidence that is analyzed that's not in the documents, but it cannot be this, you can't get this point for historical context. So your contextualization that you did at the beginning, this has to be something separate. It has to be something separate, evidence beyond the documents. Okay, so you've got 3 total points here in evidence that can be acquired. 2 points for analyzing 6 documents, explaining them, just explaining them without quoting them, and then explaining them in a way that supports your thesis statement. So that's going to get you 2 points, and then your evidence beyond the documents will get you another point. That's 3. Now, continuing on with the documents themselves, there is this analysis point. So for 3 of the 6 documents that you explain, so you explain 6 documents, for 3 of those 6, you need to go further than just explaining. You need to address for 3 of the documents how their point of view, their purpose, the historical situation, or the audience is particularly relevant to this argument that you're crafting, your thesis statement. Just 3 of those 6. So as you are explaining them, when you're done kind of explaining generally the context of the document, for 3 of them, you need to specifically address either the point of view, how the point of view of this author is relevant to your argument, or how the purpose of this document is relevant to your argument, or how the historical situation or the audience is relevant to your particular audience. So you have to identify one part of the HAP, for 3 of those 6 documents that you've used. Okay, and that would give you the analysis point. This is still in the body paragraphs. You're achieving this level of analysis in your body paragraphs as you are connecting back to your thesis statement argument. And then finally, the final 7th point is the reasoning point. And this is, I'm going to look for reasoning in the last paragraph. Reasoning, it's more difficult to achieve. It's one of the higher levels of analysis and writing. But here is a list of ways that you can acquire this one reasoning point, So in a final paragraph, you can acquire the reasoning point by explaining nuance of an issue by analyzing multiple variables. So anything that you have already stated within your essay, if there is another perspective that you want to use to analyze, like another variable or like some nuance of that, perhaps women, something that might have attributed to the change in the roles of women that you haven't already addressed in the essay, here's an opportunity to do that, to come at with an analysis point of view, something that that impacted perhaps the change in the role of women during this age. Okay, so another way to earn the point, explaining both similarities and differences, or explaining both continuity and change, or explaining multiple causes, or explaining both cause and effect. So if you have a particular idea about a cause of the change or an effect of the change, maybe how progressivism was impactful during this era, the ideas of the progressive era, how that was a cause, the focus on scientific research was a really progressive era idea. How is that sort of a continuity in this era? That's something that's different that you might use for a reasoning point. But again, continuities change, multiple causes, explaining both cause and effect. These are like different angles that you might come at analysis here in the reasoning portion of your essay that you haven't already done throughout. Explaining relevant and insightful connections within and across periods. So here we have another opportunity to move outside of just the decade of the 1920s. Your body paragraph analyzing the documents has to stay in the 1920s. But just like with contextualization at the beginning, with the reasoning at the end, you also have an opportunity to move outside of the era that you've been defined for analyzing. You might explain how there is a continuity outside of this decade, how perhaps some racial or when you look at the Great Depression, how are African Americans treated in the Great Depression? How with the strains on the economy, does it impact minorities, like the deportation of Mexican Americans and that sort of thing. So just an idea, but overall insightful connections within and across periods. Okay, so confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes. This is something that we've sort of addressed already. Qualifying or modifying an argument by considering diverse and alternative views or evidences. So here, like you might address at the in some counter argument. For example, let's say that you took a position that World War I and the contributions of African Americans during World War I gave them this hopeful position that the 20s would be a decade of fulfillment of promises for them. Perhaps that was a position you took. Well, here at the end, you might address a counter argument to that. So what evidence is there throughout this time period that would counter that argument? You might argue that the rise in racism in the teens with Woodrow Wilson's presidency and with things like the movie The Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind and the rise in racial ideas was a counter argument to this idea, and even race riots in 1919 and Red Summer, and how that might present a counter argument for this idea that African Americans did in fact have hope for a better tomorrow or a brighter decade of the 1920s. Just counter arguments can be crafted in the last paragraph. Counter arguments can be crafted in the last paragraph. So an overview here of the 7 points. Let's go through that again. Starting with contextualization, you want to open your essay with contextualization, then at the end of the first paragraph, thesis, and then your body paragraphs should all be focused on supporting that thesis statement by analyzing at least six of the documents, including one piece of outside evidence. When you analyze those 6 documents, at least 3 of the 6, you should apply the HAP directly to 3 of the 6 in order to achieve the 6th of the 7 points. And then finally, your reasoning point should be addressed in a final paragraph that does 1 of these 5 possible reasoning analyses.